I'm asking for 5 seconds. The words landed wrong in a room built for obedience. The private dining suite on the 47th floor was wrapped in glass and silence. New York reduced to a glittering pattern far below, safely distant, irrelevant. Everything inside the room had been chosen to reassure power. The muted lighting, the velvet banquette, the hand-polished marble table that never showed fingerprints. Even the air felt curated. Tiffany Ward sat at the head of the table, in her custom wheelchair, posture flawless, legs draped in tailored slacks that cost more than most people's rent. Her fingers hovered over the call button, embedded discreetly into the table's edge, the one that summoned security without noise, without scene. Across from her stood a man in a janitor's uniform. Caleb Morgan held a mop loosely at his side, not apologetic, not defiant, just still. "I don't recall authorizing staff access to this room," Tiffany said, her voice level, surgical. "You're trespassing." "I know," Caleb replied. "I'll be gone in 5 seconds." Her lips curved, not a smile, not quite, something colder. "You've already used 3. He nodded once. Then looked down. The room tightened. Tiffany didn't move at first. She had learned long ago that control was a posture as much as a decision. She had survived lawsuits, public humiliations, boardroom coups. She had learned when to look away and when to stare someone into silence. But something in his tone, neither pleading nor aggressive, slipped past her defenses. Her gaze dropped. Her right knee had shifted. Barely. A flicker. A reflex so small most doctors would have dismissed it as noise. Caleb spoke before she could correct it. "That happens when you're angry," he said gently. "Every time." The air left the room. Tiffany's fingers froze inches above the call button. "You have 5 seconds to leave," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "Or I call security." "I've been watching for 8 months," Caleb continued, calm as gravity. 3 nights a week. Every time someone talks over you, every time they underestimate you, your knee tightens. Sometimes your foot pulls back like it's bracing. "That's absurd," she snapped. "You're a janitor." "Yes," he said, "and I've spent more hours in this building than your board." Her finger hovered. The button gleamed under the soft light. One press and this would end the way things always did, with someone escorted out, dignity restored, order reestablished. She pressed it halfway. "Don't," Caleb said softly. That did it. Her hand dropped. Silence swelled, heavy and uninvited. "You think you know something my doctors don't?" Tiffany asked. "Neurologists, surgeons, people with credentials, not mops." "I think you know something they never asked," Caleb said. "And your body's been answering for you." She laughed then, sharp, incredulous, practiced. "So, what is this?" she asked. "A miracle pitch? A con?" "No," he said. "A test." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, plain card. No logo, no flourish, just 2 words printed cleanly in black ink. 30 days. He placed it on the table, just out of reach. "I'm not offering a cure," he said. "I'm offering time." Tiffany stared at the card like it might stain the marble. "You think I'd let a janitor experiment on me?" she said. "On my body? I think you're tired of pretending you don't feel it," he repeated, her jaw tightened. "You don't get to speak to me like that." "You're right," Caleb said. "I don't. That's why I'll leave." He turned toward the door. "You know," she said suddenly, her voice low, dangerous, "I could have you fired." Caleb paused but didn't turn around. "I know," he said. "I've already lost worse." That stopped her. He waited, counting the seconds in his head. 1, 2. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why risk this?" Caleb faced her then. His eyes weren't dramatic. They were tired, honest, the kind of eyes that had learned how to wait in hospital rooms. "Because I watched someone I loved give up the same way," he said. "And because one day she stopped." Tiffany's throat tightened before she could stop it. "Who?" she asked. "My wife," he said. "She was told she'd never walk again. They were wrong, a beat." "And where is she now?" Tiffany asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. "Gone," he said finally, "but not before she taught me what fear looks like when it hides in the body." The city hummed outside, indifferent. Tiffany leaned back in her chair. She looked at the glass walls, at her reflection. Perfect, immobile, controlled. "What happens if I try?" she asked quietly, "and nothing changes?" Caleb met her gaze. "Then we learn why," he said. "And if you tell me to stop, I stop." Her fingers curled against the armrest, not the button. "And what do you want in return?" she asked. He shook his head. "Nothing," he said. "I've already paid." She studied him for a long moment, not as a billionaire evaluating risk, not as a woman being challenged, but as someone standing at the edge of something she had avoided for 5 years. "You have 30 days, she said finally. "One misstep, and you're gone." Caleb nodded. "Tomorrow," she added. 9 a.m. He allowed himself a breath. "As you wish," he said. As he turned to leave, Tiffany reached out and slid the card closer to herself. She didn't look at it, not yet. And as the door closed behind him, she realized something unsettling, something she hadn't felt since the night everything stopped. For the first time in years, the room felt too quiet. And somewhere deep inside, something was listening. Because once a truth is seen, it does not unsee itself. And tomorrow would demand an answer. The service elevator smelled like lemon disinfectant and old apologies. Caleb Morgan rode it down alone, his mop bucket rolling softly at his side, the building's gold-lit corridors fading into the utilitarian hush of the staff levels. Above, Tiffany Ward would still be sitting in glass and velvet, surrounded by the kind of quiet money could buy. Below, the world resumed its honest noise, buzzing fluorescents, rattling carts, the distant thrum of a city that did not pause for anyone's dignity. He should have felt triumph. He felt careful, because he hadn't won anything. He had simply put a match near a door that had been welded shut for years. In the locker room, he changed out of his uniform, folding the shirt with the building's logo as if it were something sacred and temporary. He washed his hands longer than necessary, scrubbing beneath his fingernails until the skin around them turned pale. Some habits stayed even after the war. Some stayed after the grief. His phone buzzed as he stepped outside into the late autumn chill. "Emma, you late? I saved you a cookie, but I ate half sorry." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Caleb, half a cookie is still a miracle. I'm on my way." The subway was crowded, faces blank, tired, people wrapped in their own private storms. Caleb stood near the door, one hand steadying himself on the pole, the other tightening around the strap of his worn duffel. Inside were simple things, a rolled mat, resistance bands, and a small hand mirror scuffed at the edges, the kind you could buy at a pharmacy for $9. And then there was the other thing, a notebook with a cracked spine and softened corners. The pages inside rippled, like they had survived too many tears. Kara's journal. He didn't take it out on the train. He didn't need to. He could feel it through the fabric of his bag the way you could feel a heartbeat through a blanket. There were days he told himself he carried it for Emma. There were nights he admitted he carried it for himself. When he reached their apartment, the hallway light was flickering again. The landlord kept promising it would be fixed. The landlord promised a lot of things. Caleb unlocked the door quietly. "Daddy?" Emma's voice came from the kitchen like a little lamp turning on. She was perched at the table in socks with tiny stars on them, her hair in a messy ponytail, crayons scattered like confetti across a coloring book. A plate sat in front of her, with a cookie broken neatly in half, as if she'd tried to make honesty look polite. "You're late," she said, not accusing, just observing. "Got caught in a conversation," Caleb replied, hanging his jacket. Emma didn't look up right away. She colored in the outline of a tree with intense focus, her tongue tucked slightly between her teeth. Then she asked, very casually, as if asking about the weather, "Was it with the lady in the wheelchair?" Caleb stilled. He didn't like how quickly children learned the shape of adult silence. He set his bag down carefully. "What makes you say that?" Emma shrugged. "You get quiet like that." Caleb exhaled through his nose. A laugh almost escaped, but it snagged on something tender. "She's a person from work," he said. Emma finally looked up. Her eyes were very blue, not fragile blue, clear blue, the kind of blue that made you tell the truth by accident. "She's sad," Emma said simply. Caleb stared at her for a moment, feeling something tighten behind his ribs. "What makes you think she's sad?" he asked. Emma returned to coloring. Her face? It's fancy, but it's sad, like when you wear your "I'm fine" face. Caleb sat down across from her. He should have corrected her. He should have said, "You don't know her." He should have said a lot of grown-up things meant to protect the world from a child's accuracy. Instead, he said, "Some people carry heavy things you can't see." Emma nodded as if that were obvious. "Like mommy." The word landed softly, and still it hurt. Caleb's hand paused on the table. "Yeah," he said quietly. Like Mommy. He watched Emma color for a few seconds, letting the room be what it was, small, warm, imperfect. A kettle hissed on the stove. The neighbor's TV murmured through the wall. The city pressed against the windows like a restless animal. And in the middle of it, his daughter was making a tree green again. "Did you help the lady?" Emma asked. "I didn't help her," Caleb said. "Not yet." Emma frowned, considering. "Are you going to?" Caleb hesitated. The truth was heavier than he wanted to place in Emma's hands. He didn't want her to grow up thinking her father could fix broken adults. He didn't want her to inherit his compulsion to stand too close to other people's pain. But he also didn't want to lie. "I told her I could," he admitted. "I told her I'd try." Emma's crayon slowed. "Why?" Caleb looked down at his own hands, calloused, cleaned too many times. The hands of a man who had spent years learning how to be gentle with things that were falling apart. "Because someone once did the same for me," he said. Emma's gaze stayed on him. "Did it work?" Caleb swallowed. His mind did what it always did when he got tired. Slipped backward. 4 years ago, the hospital room had smelled like plastic and overworked air conditioning. Kara lay in the bed with her hair pulled into a knot, her eyes open but far away, as if she'd been left behind on a different shore. She had been a battlefield nurse, sharp, fearless, quick to laugh in places laughter didn't belong. The kind of woman who could stitch a wound with steady hands and then, afterward, sit on the floor with a trembling soldier and talk him back into breathing. Then came the miscarriage, the silence that followed. The day she woke up and said, very calmly, "My legs don't work." The doctors ran tests like rituals, MRIs, CT scans, blood work. They frowned at results that refused to give them a villain. No spinal injury, no stroke, no tumor. One finally said it in a voice meant to be gentle, which only made it crueler. "Conversion disorder," he said. "Functional neurological symptoms. Sometimes the mind—" Caleb had stopped the listening after mind. "What do we do?" he asked. The doctor spread his hands. "We can't fix what we can't see." But Caleb had seen it. He had seen Kara wake up sweating, gasping, convinced she was drowning on dry land. He had seen her flinch when the door creaked, her body preparing for a battle that wasn't in the room. He had seen her legs twitch when she argued, when she cried, when she tried to pretend she wasn't afraid. He learned then what no textbook taught him. The body did not always obey the story you wanted it to tell. It obeyed the story you believed. It took months, ugly months, not the inspirational kind people posted online. The kind filled with setbacks and bitterness and nights where he held Kara while she shook and whispered, "I'm trapped in here." And then, inch by inch, she returned. She stood again, not like a miracle, like a decision. 6 months later, she left for Haiti with Doctors Without Borders, smiling in the airport like she had reclaimed her own name. And then a phone call, a wrong road, bad brakes, gone in a second. But what Kara left behind wasn't only Emma. She left behind a map, a brutal, honest map of how a person crawled back from invisible ruin. Caleb blinked himself back into the apartment. Emma was watching him now, her cookie forgotten. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "You're doing the far away thing." He forced a small smile. "Sorry, kiddo." Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice as if the walls might overhear. "Is the wheelchair lady trapped like Mommy was?" Caleb's throat tightened. "I think she might be," he said. Emma nodded slowly, satisfied in a way only children could be, like they didn't need all the facts, just the shape of the truth. "Then you should help her," she said, and returned to coloring as if the matter were settled. Caleb stared at his duffel bag by the door, at the scuffed mirror inside it, at Kara's journal, resting like a quiet weight. Tomorrow at 9. He stood, poured Emma a glass of water, kissed the top of her head, and began laying out what he'd need in the morning. Not because he believed in miracles, because he believed in pattern, and because somewhere in a glass room above the city, a woman who had mastered silence was probably staring at a call button she hadn't pressed, wondering why her own body had betrayed her with the smallest truth. Caleb turned off the kitchen light. "Daddy?" Emma called as he tucked her into bed later. "Yeah?" "If she cries," Emma said, eyes already closing, "don't be scared. Sometimes crying is how people start moving." Caleb's chest tightened again, this time with something almost like hope. "I won't be scared," he promised. But when he lay awake afterward, staring at the ceiling, he knew tomorrow wouldn't begin with stretching. It would begin with boundaries, with rules, with a woman like Tiffany Ward making sure she could stop him before he ever got close enough to change her. And that was exactly why Chapter 3 would start the way all real healing did, by drawing the first line. Tiffany Ward had not slept. She had stared at the ceiling of her townhouse until the faint gray of morning leaked through the automated curtains, counting breaths the way some people counted sheep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. Her knee, that traitorous flicker, answering a man she had dismissed with a glance. At 8:58 a.m., she was already in the sitting room. The space had been designed for control. Clean lines, pale stone, furniture positioned with mathematical precision. Nothing accidental, nothing sentimental. The wheelchair sat exactly where it always did, angled toward the window, as if even the sunrise required supervision. At 9 a.m. on the dot, the doorbell chimed. Tiffany did not flinch. Her assistant hovered in the doorway, tablet clutched to her chest. "Miss Ward, the maintenance—" "I know who it is," Tiffany said. "Send him in, and then leave us." The assistant hesitated. "Alone?" "Yes." A beat. "Lock the outer door," Tiffany added calmly. "I don't want interruptions." When Caleb Morgan stepped inside, he did not comment on the room. He had learned long ago that power liked to be admired and feared being seen. He carried a small duffel over his shoulder. No uniform today, just jeans, a plain gray sweater, and shoes worn soft with use. He stopped several feet away, hands visible, posture neutral. "Good morning," he said. Tiffany did not return the greeting. Instead, she studied him like a contract she intended to dismantle. "You have 30 days," she said, voice crisp. "And before you misunderstand what that means, we're setting rules." Caleb nodded. "That's fair." Her eyebrow arched slightly at the lack of resistance. "Rule 1, she said. "You do not touch me without permission. Ever." "Agreed." "Rule 2, she continued. "No pity. If I hear even a hint of it, this ends." "I don't do pity," Caleb said. "It gets in the way." She watched his face closely for irony, found none. "Rule 3, Tiffany said, leaning forward slightly in her chair. "If I say stop, you stop. Immediately. No arguments, no psychology tricks, no heroic speeches." Caleb met her gaze. Understood. Silence settled between them. Tiffany waited for him to speak, to push, to claim authority. He didn't. "Is that all?" he asked gently. Something in her tightened. "Yes," she said. "That's all." Caleb set his duffel down slowly and unzipped it. He didn't take out bands or mats. He took out only one thing, a small hand mirror. It was scuffed along the edges, cheap plastic frame dulled by time. He held it up, not offering it yet, just letting it exist in the room like an unexpected truth. "What's that?" Tiffany asked. "A mirror," he said. "I have mirrors," she replied coolly, gesturing to the glass walls, the polished surfaces that reflected her from every angle. "Those are for looking," Caleb said. "This is for seeing." She scoffed. "I didn't invite you here to philosophize." "I know," he said. "That's why I won't." He stepped closer, only one step, and stopped, careful to keep the distance she had set. "May I?" he asked, holding the mirror out. Tiffany hesitated, then nodded once. He placed the mirror in her hands. It felt absurd, childish. She hated it immediately. "Now what?" she asked. "Look," he said. "I look at myself every day." "No," Caleb replied calmly. "Look when you feel something." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "And what exactly am I supposed to feel?" "Anything," he said. "Anger, disgust, control slipping." Her jaw tightened on instinct. "Watch," he said quietly. She didn't want to. She did anyway. Her reflection stared back, immaculate, composed, eyes cool and assessing, the face that had stared down hostile boards and hostile headlines alike. "Now," Caleb said, "tell me you don't need this." "I don't need this," Tiffany said flatly, and her knee jerked, not much, but enough. Her breath caught. She looked down too late. She had already felt it. The betrayal. She slammed the mirror onto the table. "Enough!" Caleb didn't move. "That was permission," he said gently. "You can say stop." She stared at him, chest rising faster now. "You think this proves something?" she demanded. Reflexes mean nothing. They mean your body is still listening, Caleb replied, even when you tell it not to. Her fingers curled around the armrest. You are dangerously close to breaking Rule 2, she warned. No, he said. I'm staying well within Rule 1. She hated that he was right. You don't know me, she said. You don't know what I've done to get here. I know you didn't get here gently, Caleb said. That landed harder than she expected. She turned her chair slightly away from him, toward the window. The city gleamed back at her, arrogant and alive. You think this is about my legs, she said quietly. You think you were the first person to notice things I don't talk about. I think it's not about your legs at all, Caleb replied. She laughed again, this time brittle. Then enlighten me. He waited a beat. I think you stopped moving because it was the only way left to protect yourself. Her head snapped back toward him. That's not your call. I know, he said. It's yours. She stared at him, searching for something. Condescension, ambition, hunger. She found only patience. That unsettled her more than arrogance ever could. You have a lot of nerve, she said. I have experience, Caleb replied. They look similar from the outside. Her throat tightened despite herself. And what makes you think I want to be fixed, she asked. This chair works. It's predictable. It doesn't surprise me. Neither does fear, Caleb said softly, until it does. Silence pressed in again, heavier now. Tiffany closed her eyes. When I wake up, she said, voice low, controlled, there are days I don't feel anything below my waist. Nothing. No pain, no sensation, just absence. Caleb listened without interrupting. And there are days, she continued, when it feels like something is locked inside me, screaming, and I don't know which is worse. She opened her eyes. That, she said, is why I don't do hope. Caleb nodded slowly. I won't ask you to, he said. Hope is loud. We'll start with honesty. She looked at him sharply. And what does honesty look like? It looks like noticing what your body does when you're angry, he said. When you're cornered, when you're seen. She swallowed. Today, Caleb continued, we won't try to stand. We won't try to walk. All I want is for you to tell me when you feel something, before you shut it down. She considered that, then nodded once. Fine, she said, but the moment this turns into therapy jargon, we're done. A corner of his mouth lifted, just slightly. Deal. He reached for the mirror again, but stopped short. May I? He asked. Tiffany hesitated, then slid it back toward herself. She held it up. Her reflection met her gaze, steady and unyielding. And for the first time in 5 years, she didn't look away when her body answered a truth she hadn't given permission to feel. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious. Inside Beijing, and in the quiet space they created, something dangerous had begun. Not movement, not healing, but awareness. Because once a body is allowed to speak, the next question is whether the mind is brave enough to listen. The silence after truth was different. It did not rush to be filled. It did not ask to be managed. It simply stayed, wide and unblinking, like a body of water you only noticed once you stepped too close to the edge. Tiffany Ward kept the mirror in her hands long after Caleb stopped speaking. Her reflection looked unchanged. The same immaculate hair, the same precise mouth, the same woman the world believed it knew. But something beneath that image had shifted, and she felt it the way you felt pressure changes before a storm. Subtle, undeniable. You're very confident for someone without credentials, she said finally. Caleb did not sit. He remained standing, weight evenly distributed, as if his body understood something hers was still negotiating. I'm not confident, he replied. I'm careful, she scoffed. You stood in front of me yesterday and told me my body was lying. No, he corrected gently. I said your body was telling the truth. It's the story around it that's been edited. That did it. Her composure cracked. Not visibly, not dramatically, but enough for heat to rise behind her eyes. You think this is a story? She asked. You think paralysis is a metaphor? I think it can be a language, Caleb said, especially when words stop being safe. She turned away from him again, rolling her chair a few inches closer to the window. Outside, the city rose in rigid confidence, steel and glass pretending permanence. You don't know what unsafe looks like, she said. You clean floors, you go home, you sleep. Caleb said nothing. You don't sit in rooms where people smile while calculating how to dismantle you, she continued. You don't wake up to headlines that turn your worst day into a spectacle. Still nothing. You don't lose everything because you trusted the wrong person. Her hands tightened on the armrests. My husband, she said. Former husband. Caleb waited. He loved the company, Tiffany went on, voice measured but tight. Loved the idea of us, the brand, the image. He used to joke that I was the most profitable thing he'd ever acquired. Caleb's jaw set, but he did not interrupt. The night it happened, she said quietly, why we had fought. About money. About control. About me asking him to show up to something that wasn't about him. Her reflection hovered faintly in the glass. I went to the terrace, she continued, for air. Caleb felt his chest tighten, but he stayed still. And I remember thinking, Tiffany said, her voice flattening, that if I disappeared for a moment, he might finally notice the absence. She laughed once, hollow. So, no, she said, I didn't fall. Caleb did not move, did not breathe. I jumped, she said. The words settled heavily between them. Not to die, she added quickly, as if correcting a misinterpretation she could not afford. I just wanted the noise to stop. The pressure, the constant measuring. Her fingers loosened, trembling now. And when I woke up, she said, everyone was very kind, very careful. Doctors, lawyers, assistants. They spoke around me, not to me. She turned back toward him. And then the scans came back clean. Caleb exhaled slowly. No spinal damage, she continued. No neurological explanation. One of them actually said, her mouth twisted, you should be walking. The room felt smaller. So, when I didn't, Tiffany said, they looked at me like I was inconvenient, like I was refusing to cooperate with reality. She swallowed. That chair? She nodded toward it. It became my alibi, my armor, proof that something was wrong, because if nothing was wrong, then it meant I had chosen to stop. Caleb stepped closer, carefully, stopping just at the boundary she had set. That wasn't a choice, he said quietly. That was survival. She laughed bitterly. Try telling that to the part of me that wakes up every morning wondering if I'm a fraud. He held her gaze. You didn't lose your legs, Caleb said, voice steady but firm. You surrendered them. Her eyes flared. Don't. Not as punishment, he continued. As protection. She shook her head. You don't get to frame my trauma. I get to name what I've seen, he said. And I've seen this before. She stared at him. In your wife. Yes. A long beat passed. She screamed at me once, Caleb said, voice low. Told me she hated me for asking her to try again. Told me the chair was safer because it didn't ask anything of her. Tiffany's breath hitched despite herself. And what did you do? She asked. I sat on the floor, he said, so I wouldn't look down at her. Her hands trembled now, openly. And when she stood, Tiffany asked, Caleb's eyes softened. She cried, not because she was strong, because she was terrified of losing the protection she'd built. That landed somewhere deep. You're telling me, Tiffany said slowly, that this, she gestured vaguely toward her body, isn't weakness. No, Caleb replied. It's a wall, and walls are built by smart people who ran out of exits. She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were wet, but she did not look away. What if I stand? She whispered, and everything comes back. Caleb didn't hesitate. Then we don't outrun it. And if I break? She asked. Then you break with witnesses, he said. Not alone. Silence pressed in again, but this time it was different, less brittle, more exposed. Tiffany looked down at her legs. Sometimes, she admitted, when I'm angry, it feels like electricity, like something trying to wake up. Caleb nodded. That's not damage, that's resistance. She let out a shaky breath. I hate that part of myself, she said. I know, he replied. It's the part that won't stay quiet. She leaned back in her chair, exhaustion finally breaking through her precision. So, what now? She asked. Now, Caleb said, we stop pretending this is about walking. She frowned. Then what is it about? About letting your body finish a sentence it started 5 years ago, he said, and deciding whether you're willing to hear it. Tiffany stared at the window again, watching a helicopter cut through the sky like an incision. After a long moment, she spoke, so softly he almost missed it. I don't want to be brave, she said. I just don't want to be numb. Caleb nodded. Then tomorrow, he said, we leave the chair. Her head snapped back to him. Absolutely not. Not to walk, he added, just to sit somewhere else. She hesitated. On the floor, he said, where the body remembers gravity differently. The idea terrified her more than she expected. Tomorrow, she repeated slowly. Yes. She swallowed, then nodded once. Tomorrow, she agreed. Caleb gathered his things without hurry. At the door, he paused. One more thing, he said. She looked at him, wary. You didn't fail because you jumped, he said. You survived because you didn't stay on the edge. Her throat tightened. When the door closed behind him, Tiffany sat alone in the quiet room, staring at her legs, not with accusation, not with denial, but with something dangerously close to curiosity. And as the city moved relentlessly below her window, she understood what tomorrow would demand. Not strength, not courage, but a willingness to step off the throne she had mistaken for safety, because the next battle would not be against gravity, but against the lie that stillness had ever been her choice. The park was quieter than Tiffany expected. Not silent, New York never was, but softened, as if the morning had pulled a thin veil over the noise. The air smelled like damp leaves and hot pretzels from a cart that hadn't decided whether it was open yet. A crooked line of benches faced a duck pond glazed with pale light, the water barely moving. Tiffany sat beneath an elm whose roots had buckled the concrete into honest, uneven shapes. She wore a wool coat the color of stone and gloves she didn't need. The sunglasses were unnecessary, too. There was no sun, but the armor had habits. She had told her assistant she needed air. She hadn't said she was hoping to see him. Caleb Morgan was jogging up the path, breath steady, hoodie unzipped against the cool. Beside him bounced a small girl with a lopsided ponytail and an enthusiasm that refused to be contained by gravity. She dragged a doll behind her by one arm, its fabric body thumping against the path like it had already survived several endings. "Daddy, wait!" the girl called, laughing. "Lucy's feet are tired." "That's not how feet work," Caleb said, slowing anyway. "They are when you're brave," the girl replied solemnly. Tiffany heard the laugh first. It surprised her, the sound itself, free and unguarded. It reached her before she could prepare for it, before she could turn away. She knew that laugh now. It had been echoing faintly in her head since the day he told her she hadn't lost her legs. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The girl saw her before Caleb did. Lucy was released without ceremony and abandoned on the path as the child stopped directly in front of Tiffany's wheelchair. Small hands planted on narrow hips, head tilted, eyes wide and curious. "I know you," the girl announced. Tiffany blinked behind her sunglasses. "Do you?" she asked. "You had dinner with my daddy," the girl said, nodding decisively. "At the shiny place." Tiffany's mouth curved despite herself. "Did I?" "Mm-hmm," the girl confirmed. "You sat. He cleaned. That's dinner." Tiffany snorted before she could stop it. Caleb arrived then, slightly breathless, eyes flicking between them. "Emma," he said gently, "what did we say about—" "It's okay," Tiffany interrupted. She removed her sunglasses and met the child's gaze. "What's your name?" "Emma," the girl said. "This is Lucy." Lucy was held up for inspection. The doll was tragic. One ear stitched back on with mismatched thread. A button eye missing, replaced with something that might once have been part of a jacket. A pink ribbon tied where hair should have been, fraying at the ends. Tiffany stared. "What happened to her?" she asked. Emma shrugged. "She's been through stuff." Caleb winced slightly. Tiffany didn't miss it. "Why don't you get a new one?" Tiffany asked, then immediately regretted the question. Emma frowned as if Tiffany had suggested something morally offensive. "Because this one knows my secrets," she said. "New dolls don't." Tiffany felt something twist low in her chest. She hesitated, then reached out. "May I?" Emma placed Lucy into her hands with a gravity usually reserved for heirlooms. The doll was lighter than Tiffany expected. Fragile, soft in a way nothing in her home was allowed to be. "You fixed her," Tiffany murmured, tracing the stitched ear. "I didn't want her to feel left out just because she's broken," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Broken things are still people." Caleb closed his eyes. The sentence hit Tiffany like cold water. She looked at the child again, really looked this time, at the certainty, the lack of performance, the way truth seemed to pass through her without getting stuck. "Who told you that?" Tiffany asked quietly. Emma shrugged. "Mommy used to." Caleb inhaled sharply. Tiffany handed Lucy back gently, as if returning something sacred. Thank you, she said to Emma, for trusting me. Emma beamed. You look lonely on the inside, she said. That's worse than outside lonely. Caleb crouched slightly. Emma, it's okay, Tiffany said again, her voice soft now. She's right. Emma nodded, satisfied. Lucy can keep you company if you want. Tiffany laughed, a small surprise sound. I think Lucy might be too brave for me. Emma considered this. That's okay, she said. She's patient. Caleb sat on the bench beside Tiffany, once Emma ran off to the pond, Lucy bobbing in her arms. For a while, neither of them spoke. The quiet felt different here, less curated, less sharp. She's extraordinary, Tiffany said finally. Caleb nodded. Takes after her mom. A beat passed. I'm not good with children, Tiffany admitted. That's because most people forget they used to be one, Caleb replied. She glanced at him. You talk like a janitor who swallowed a therapist. He smiled faintly. I mop more than floors. She surprised herself by smiling back. Tiffany watched Emma feed the ducks, laughter echoing across the water. Something about the scene tugged at her, an image she hadn't allowed herself in years. I used to be like that, she said quietly, before the company, before the headlines. Caleb didn't rush to answer. I don't want to be untouchable anymore, Tiffany continued. I'm tired of being a symbol. Caleb nodded slowly. Then stop being one. She looked at him sharply. You make it sound easy. It isn't, he said. It's just honest. They sat there until the chill crept into Tiffany's bones, and Emma announced that Lucy needed hot chocolate immediately, or she might perish. As they parted, Tiffany found herself holding the small hand mirror Caleb had given her. She hadn't realized she'd brought it. Back in her townhouse, the space felt altered, not warmer, not kinder, but less sterile. She rolled into her study and stopped in front of the grand piano. The keys were pristine, untouched for years. Her fingers hovered. She pressed one. A single note rang out, thin but alive. Tiffany closed her eyes and, for a moment, didn't feel broken. She felt unfinished. And as that thought settled, she realized something else. Tomorrow, when Caleb asked her to leave the chair, she would be afraid. But fear, she was beginning to understand, was not the same thing as stopping, because the child had seen her not as a billionaire or a patient, but as a person. And once seen that way, the next step could no longer be avoided. The mat waited in the center of the room like an accusation. It was pale gray, unremarkable, laid carefully on the marble floor where nothing had ever been placed without intention. Tiffany Ward stared at it from her wheelchair, arms crossed, jaw tight. The chair felt different today, not heavier, not lighter, but exposed, as if it had been moved from its usual place of authority into the middle of a question. You said we weren't walking, she said. Caleb stood a few feet away, hands loose at his sides. We aren't. Then why is that thing there? Because the floor tells the truth faster than furniture does, she scoffed. I didn't invite you here to make my house uncomfortable. He nodded once. I know. That unsettled her. He waited. He always did. It felt like standing in front of a man-shaped pause. Tiffany inhaled sharply. Explain. Caleb knelt and pressed his palm flat against the mat, grounding himself before he spoke. Your chair gives you height, distance. It lets your mind stay in charge. The floor takes that away. It reminds the body what gravity feels like. And what if I don't want to remember? She asked. Then we stop, he said immediately. Rule 3. Her fingers flexed against the armrest. She hated how much she appreciated his obedience. Fine, she said, but you don't touch me. I won't. He stepped back. Tiffany rolled closer to the mat, heart pounding now. The idea of transferring, of lowering herself without the armor of wheels and steel, made her throat tighten. It wasn't the fear of falling, it was the fear of being seen trying. Sit, Caleb said softly. Not on the floor, on the edge. She laughed bitterly. You make it sound like a dinner party. Everything is less terrifying when you give it a smaller name. She angled her chair and, with deliberate slowness, shifted her weight forward. Her hands trembled as they reached for the mat. The marble was cold beneath her palms. Too real. Her legs didn't respond right away. Panic flickered, quick, sharp. Breathe, Caleb said. Don't command them. Invite them. She closed her eyes, furious that she was obeying him, furious that her body felt like it was listening. Her left thigh tightened. A sensation, pressure, not pain, answered her attention. Good, Caleb said, not triumphantly, just factual. Now let yourself slide. Tiffany swallowed and leaned forward. The moment her weight shifted, something broke loose. Her breath hitched, her arms shook. She slid, too fast, and landed on the mat with a gasp, the impact jarring but not violent. For a heartbeat she lay there, stunned, not fallen, grounded. Caleb stayed where he was. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know," she said, voice thin. "I think so." She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. It looked farther away than it ever had from the chair. "I hate this," she whispered. "I know," Caleb said, her hands curled into fists. "I feel ridiculous. That's normal. I feel exposed. That too. And I wanted to crawl back into the chair and pretend this never happened." He nodded. "That's the throne calling you back." She laughed once, breathless. "You call it a throne like it's a crime." "It was useful," he said, "until it became a hiding place." She turned her head toward him. "You think I'm hiding. I think you've been surviving," he replied. "There's a difference." Tiffany tried to sit up. Her abs fired weakly, unfamiliar with the demand. The effort sent a tremor through her legs, a rush of sensation that made her gasp. "There," Caleb said. "That. Do you feel it?" "Yes," she snapped, then softened. "Yes." Her legs were buzzing now, alive in a way that terrified her. She dragged herself into a seated position, arms straining, sweat dotted her hairline. Her heart hammered like it was trying to escape. I can't stand," she said quickly. "Don't ask me to." "I won't," Caleb replied. "Not today." She exhaled, relief and frustration tangling. They sat in silence for a few moments, her on the mat, him on the floor nearby, level for the first time. "This is humiliating," she said quietly. Caleb glanced at her. "Humiliation means you care." She closed her eyes. "I care too much." "That's not the problem," he said. "The problem is you learn to punish yourself for it." Her eyes opened. "You don't know that." "I do," he said, "because you apologize to your body before you let it feel." That landed. She laughed then, sharp, unsteady. "You're unbearable," he smiled faintly. "So, I've been told." She shifted her weight, testing. Her legs responded in fragments, small contractions, tiny corrections. "I moved," she said, disbelief creeping in. "You did," Caleb confirmed. "It was barely anything." "Barely anything is still something," he said. "Muscles that don't work don't argue." Her breath came fast now. "Stop narrating." He lifted a hand. "Stopping." She pressed her palms into the mat and leaned forward again. Her knees wobbled, instinctively trying to tuck under her. Caleb leaned forward reflexively, then stopped himself. "I didn't ask you to catch me," she said, breathless but firm. "I know," he replied, settling back. "I trust you." That did something dangerous to her chest. She shifted again, dragging herself an inch forward. The effort burned. Her legs shook, but they didn't collapse. She laughed, a wild, broken sound. "I moved," she said again, louder this time. "I actually moved." Caleb didn't cheer, he didn't clap, he just nodded. Tiffany's eyes filled before she could stop them. Tears slipped down her temples and into her hair. "I hate you," she said, voice cracking. "I know," he replied gently. She wiped her face angrily. "I hate that you're right." "Me too," he said. She slumped back onto the mat, exhausted. Her legs lay still now, but not dead, quiet, waiting. "I don't want the world to see me like this," she whispered. "Trying, failing." Caleb's voice was steady. "The world doesn't get to see this. This is between you and gravity." She stared at the ceiling again, chest rising and falling. After a long moment, she spoke. "I read something this morning," she said. "An article." Caleb waited. "They called me a performance," she continued. "A brand built on sympathy. They said if I could stand, I would have already." Her hands trembled. "That voice," she said, "is loud." Caleb nodded. "It usually gets loud right before change." She laughed bitterly. "Then it's screaming." He stood and extended his hand, then stopped, remembering Rule 1. "Do you want help back into the chair?" he asked. Tiffany hesitated, then nodded once. With care, with permission, he helped her transfer back. The chair accepted her like an old habit. She hated how relieved she felt. Caleb gathered the mat slowly. "This doesn't mean you failed," he said. "I know," she replied, though she wasn't sure she believed it yet. As he moved toward the door, she spoke again. "Caleb?" He turned. If tomorrow I decide I can't do this, she said, voice low, you won't be disappointed? He considered that. I'll be honest, he said. I'll be concerned. She nodded. Fair. When the door closed, Tiffany sat alone, staring at her legs. They felt heavy now, quiet again, but not absent. And that night, when the headlines returned and the doubt pressed in, she understood something she hadn't before. Progress did not announce itself as victory. Sometimes it arrived as fear, whispering that tomorrow would be harder. The chair was back where it belonged, perfectly angled, perfectly still. Tiffany Ward noticed this the moment she opened her eyes. The townhouse was quiet in the way expensive spaces often were, not peaceful, but controlled. The curtains were drawn. The lights were dimmed to their morning preset. The world had been arranged so nothing would ask anything of her. Her legs felt heavy, not numb, not painful, heavy, like doors that had been shut too quickly. She stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, replaying yesterday in fragments. The mat, the burn in her thighs, the humiliating tremor in her knees, the sound she'd made when she realized she had moved, and then the other sound, the ping of her phone. She reached for it now, already knowing what waited. The headline was cruel in its efficiency. Sympathy as strategy inside Tiffany Ward's 5-year performance. She didn't open the article. She didn't need to. Her mind filled in the rest easily. The insinuations, the armchair diagnoses, the question that had followed her for half a decade like a shadow with teeth. If you could stand, why haven't you? Her jaw tightened. The chair felt safer. She rolled into the sitting room, bypassing the mat as if it were a memory she refused to acknowledge. She parked herself by the window, the same place she'd commanded from for years, and stared at the city until the buildings blurred. At 9 a.m., her phone buzzed again. Caleb, I'm downstairs. She stared at the screen, didn't respond. At 9:10, another message. Caleb, I'll wait. She turned the phone face down. By noon, the silence inside her had grown loud enough to drown out everything else. Her assistant called. Her lawyer left a voicemail heavy with concern and implication. The PR team sent a draft statement, neutral, soothing, dishonest. She deleted them all. By evening, she hadn't moved. Not because she couldn't, because she didn't trust what would happen if she tried. Outside the gate, Caleb Morgan sat on the low stone wall, with his back straight and his duffel at his feet. People passed without noticing him. The neighborhood was accustomed to invisibility when it came packaged as labor. He had not rung the bell. He knew the difference between a door that needed knocking and a door that needed patience. Emma had asked where he was going that morning. To see a friend, he'd said. Is she okay? Emma had asked, suspicious of the pause. She might not be, he'd replied, but that doesn't mean she's lost. Emma had nodded solemnly, then handed him Lucy. In case, she'd said. Now Lucy sat beside him on the wall, propped against his bag like a silent witness. Hours passed. At dusk, the gate clicked softly. The front door did not open all the way. Tiffany stood in the narrow gap, wrapped in a robe, her hair undone, her face pale and unguarded. She was standing, barely, her hands braced against the doorframe, legs stiff as if they didn't quite trust the ground yet. Caleb rose slowly, careful not to startle her. You didn't leave, she said, voice thin. No, he replied. I said I'd wait. She swallowed. I didn't ask you to. I know. Her eyes flicked to Lucy, then back to him. Something cracked in her composure, not dramatically, but enough. I can't do this today, she said. I can't be watched. I can't be measured. Caleb nodded once. Then we won't. She blinked. You're not going to argue? No, he said. I'm going to sit. He lowered himself onto the step opposite her, leaving space between them. Lucy remained on the wall, patient and absurd. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Tiffany spoke. They think I'm a fraud, she said quietly, that I built an empire on a lie. Caleb didn't rush to contradict her. Part of me thinks they're right, she continued, because yesterday I moved. And if I could move yesterday, then what does that say about the last 5 years? Caleb's voice was steady. It says you weren't ready. Her laugh was brittle. That sounds like an excuse. It's not, he said. It's a timeline. She looked at him sharply. You really believe that? I believe your body didn't trust the world enough to come back yet, he said. And yesterday it tried. Her hands trembled against the frame. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of failing, of succeeding. He nodded. Because if you succeed, the story changes. And if the story changes, she whispered, then I have to feel everything I've been avoiding. Caleb reached into his duffel and took out the notebook, Kara's journal. He didn't open it right away. He held it, letting its weight speak first. She wrote this 3 months before she stood, he said quietly. Tiffany's eyes dropped to it. He opened to a page worn thin by fingers. Today, he read, I felt a twitch, just one. It terrified me more than the paralysis, because it meant I might have to live again. Tiffany closed her eyes. She wasn't ready then either, Caleb continued. She disappeared for days, refused therapy, told me to stop believing in her. He paused. I didn't, he said. Tiffany's breath hitched. What if I disappear again? She asked. What if tomorrow I wake up and everything is heavy like this forever? Caleb met her gaze. Then we name it. We don't shame it. She shook her head. You make it sound manageable. It's not, he said honestly, but it's survivable. Her voice dropped to a whisper. What if the voice telling me I'm lying never goes away? Caleb considered that. Then we teach it to speak differently, he said, or we stop letting it be the loudest one. Tiffany slid down the frame carefully and sat on the step, exhaustion overtaking pride. Her legs folded beneath her awkwardly, but they held. She buried her face in her hands. I hate that I want you to stay, she said. Caleb's answer came without hesitation. I'm not going anywhere. She looked up, eyes red. That's a promise you shouldn't make lightly. He smiled faintly. I know. Night settled around them, soft and unassuming. The city lights blinked on one by one. After a long while, Tiffany straightened. Tomorrow, she said. 9 a.m. Caleb nodded. I'll be here. And if I freeze again? Then we sit again, he said. She glanced at Lucy, still propped faithfully against the bag. I don't deserve this, Tiffany murmured. Caleb shook his head. Healing isn't about deserve. She nodded slowly, absorbing that. As he stood to leave, she spoke once more. Caleb? Yes? If I fall apart, she said, don't tell me I'm strong. He met her eyes. I won't, he said. I'll tell you you're human. She watched him walk away down the path, Lucy tucked under his arm, his figure blending back into the city. When the door closed behind her, Tiffany remained on the step, legs aching. Heart-raising, not defeated, not victorious, just present. And for the first time since the headlines began, the silence inside her didn't feel like a verdict. It felt like a pause, because the next morning would not begin with standing, but with the far more dangerous act of showing up. The ballroom glittered like a promise no one could keep. Crystal chandeliers spilled light across marble floors polished to mirror brightness. A string quartet played something soft and tasteful near the far wall, music designed not to interrupt conversations about money. Every surface reflected success back onto itself. Glass, silver, silk, an ecosystem where power recognized power and nodded politely. Tiffany Ward arrived exactly 12 minutes late. It was deliberate. She was wheeled in by her assistant, dressed in a navy gown that fell cleanly over her legs, elegant and unremarkable in the way wealth preferred. Her hair was swept back, makeup restrained. She looked, to the watching crowd, like the woman they had always known, composed, untouchable, safely seated. What they did not know was that her heart was already racing. The gala was for her foundation, spinal injury research, the flagship charity that had defined her public image for years. Tonight's donors had written checks with one hand while whispering with the other. Sympathy had always been good for business. Caleb stood near the back of the room in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders. He kept his hands clasped in front of him, posture neutral, invisible in the way he had learned to be. Beside him, Emma shifted from foot to foot, her dress a little wrinkled, her socks mismatched on purpose. "Daddy?" she whispered, tugging his sleeve. "She looks like a queen." Caleb smiled faintly. "She is." Tiffany didn't look at the crowd as she was guided toward the front. She looked straight ahead, past the podium, past the lights, fixing her gaze on a point only she could see. Every instinct she had honed over decades told her to stay where she was, to deliver the speech as planned, to let the applause come without risk. Her assistant leaned in. "Miss Ward, whenever you're ready." Tiffany nodded. The microphone hummed softly as it was adjusted. The room settled into attentive silence, the practiced kind, the kind that waited to be impressed. Tiffany placed her hands on the armrests of her chair. The touch sent a jolt through her. Not fear exactly, but memory. The mat, the step, the doorframe, the way her legs had held when she had stopped running from the moment. She breathed. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," she began, voice steady, measured, "for supporting research that has meant so much to me, personally and professionally." The crowd nodded along. This was familiar territory. "For years," she continued, "I believed that strength meant stillness, that dignity meant endurance without complaint." A ripple of approval moved through the room. She paused. "And I was wrong." The ripple stilled. Tiffany tightened her grip on the armrests. Her heart hammered so loudly, she was certain the microphones would pick it up. "I've spent 5 years in this chair," she said. "Not because I couldn't stand," a murmur rose, quick and sharp, "but because I was afraid of what would happen if I tried." The silence that followed was not polite. It was absolute. Tiffany felt it then, the familiar electricity, the surge of sensation in her legs, the tremor that had once sent her retreating. This time, she didn't pull away from it. She leaned forward. Her assistant's hand hovered instinctively near her shoulder. Tiffany shook her head once. "No," she said quietly. "I'll walk." The word felt illegal. She placed her feet flat on the floor. Time slowed, not cinematically, not dramatically, but the way it did when the body refused to be rushed. Her knees wobbled. Her calves burned. Every nerve screamed with conflicting instructions. Caleb's breath caught at the back of the room. Emma squeezed his hand. Tiffany pushed. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then she stood. The room inhaled as one. She didn't straighten fully at first. She stayed there, trembling, finding her center, allowing her body to remember gravity without punishment. The applause did not come. No one dared to break the moment. She took one step. The click of her heel on marble sounded impossibly loud. Then another. Each movement was deliberate, ungraceful, honest. By the time she reached the podium, her legs were shaking, her pulse wild, but she was upright, alive. She adjusted the microphone with hands that would not quite stop trembling. "I didn't lose my legs," she said clearly. "I surrendered them, to fear, to shame, to the story that told me I was safer if I didn't feel." A gasp rippled through the room. "I made my pain look like elegance," she continued. "I made my silence look like strength." Her gaze swept across the audience. Bankers, surgeons, executives, donors, people who had applauded her endurance without ever asking its cost. And it nearly destroyed me. From the back of the room, Caleb watched with eyes that burned. Tiffany steadied herself against the podium. "Tonight, I'm not standing here as a symbol," she said. "I'm standing here as a woman who finally chose to listen to her body instead of punishing it." Her voice softened. "And if I can leave you with anything, it's this. Healing doesn't ask for permission. It only asks for one foolish, terrifying moment when you decide to try." For a fraction of a second, no one moved. Then the room erupted. Applause thundered against the walls. People stood. Some cried openly. Phones rose, recording the moment as history, as content, as proof. Tiffany barely heard any of it. Her eyes were locked on the back of the room, on a man in an ill-fitting suit and a little girl clapping so hard her hands hurt. Caleb didn't applaud. He simply mouthed the words, "You did it." Tiffany nodded once. "We did." Later, on the terrace outside the ballroom, the night air cut through the heat of adrenaline. Tiffany sat on the stone ledge, shoes discarded, legs dangling freely over the edge. She pressed a cup of tea between her palms, grounding herself in its warmth. Caleb joined her, careful not to crowd her space. "You surprised them," he said. She huffed a weak laugh. "I surprised myself." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the city humming below like a living thing. "When I stood up there," Tiffany said quietly, "I didn't feel strong." Caleb glanced at her. "What did you feel?" "Free," she said. "Terrified." "And free," he nodded. "Freedom usually feels like that at first." She looked out over the lights. "I don't know what happens next." "That's okay," Caleb replied. "You don't have to." She turned to him then, expression unguarded, something new and fragile in her eyes. "I don't want to go back," she said, "to the chair being the only place I exist." "You don't have to," he said gently. A breeze lifted her hair, cool against her skin. Tiffany closed her eyes, letting it pass through her, without resistance. For the first time in years, the future did not feel like something to manage. It felt like something to enter. The applause did not follow Tiffany Ward home. It stayed behind in the ballroom, echoing against chandeliers, dissolving into champagne glasses and congratulatory murmurs. By the time her townhouse door closed behind her that night, the silence had returned, heavier now for having been interrupted. She stood just inside the entryway for a long moment. Not because she was tired, because she could. Her legs trembled faintly, a reminder rather than a warning. She placed a hand against the wall, not to lean, but to feel the cool solidity of it. Proof, presence, gravity without punishment. She exhaled. The phone in her clutch vibrated again. Messages stacked on messages. Headlines multiplying faster than truth ever could. From wheelchair to warrior. Tiffany Ward stuns gala with miracle walk. Exclusive, the janitor who changed everything. She scrolled once. Then she turned the phone face down and left it on the console like something that had lost its authority. In the kitchen, she poured a glass of water instead of wine. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with the aftershock of choice. She drank slowly, barefoot on cold stone, letting the ordinary ground her in a way luxury jurors never had. For the first time in years, she slept without medication. The next morning, the boardroom was full, not the ceremonial kind, the real one. Glass walls, long table, faces trained to read risk before it announced itself. Tiffany entered walking, a slim cane in her hand, not as a crutch, but as punctuation. The room stilled. A few people stood instinctively, then froze, unsure of protocol. "Sit," she said lightly. "I will." They obeyed. Her legal counsel spoke first, words clipped and careful. "Last night's demonstration has generated significant attention. We need to move quickly to control the narrative." Tiffany folded her hands on the table. "We don't." A murmur rippled. "The public is framing this as a miracle," the PR director added. "If we don't guide perception, others will." Tiffany nodded. "Good." They stared at her. "I am not a miracle," she said evenly, "and I'm done pretending I am." Her COO leaned forward. "Tiffany, with respect, your foundation is about healing," she finished, "not performance." Silence. She continued. "Effective immediately, we're expanding scope, trauma-informed care, functional neurological disorders, long-term recovery, not inspirational sound bites." The PR director frowned. "That language is complex." "Then we'll educate," Tiffany replied, "or we'll get out of the way." Her lawyer cleared his throat. "There's also the matter of the employee who accompanied you last night, Mr. Morgan." Tiffany's gaze sharpened. "What about him?" "There are inquiries," he said carefully. "Conflicts of interest, compensation, exploitation claims." Tiffany leaned back. "Caleb Morgan is not my employee," she said. "He is my collaborator." The word landed like a shift in weather. "And he will not be used as a headline," she added. "If anyone here tries to turn him into a symbol, you answer to me." No one challenged her. When the meeting adjourned, Tiffany walked out alone, not because she wanted distance, but because she no longer needed escort. Caleb was at the clinic that afternoon, sleeves rolled up, adjusting a borrowed exam table that wobbled on uneven legs. The space was temporary, a church basement with peeling paint and stubborn light. But there was warmth in it, the kind that came from people choosing to show up. He heard her before he saw her. Footsteps. Unhurried. He turned. Tiffany stood in the doorway, cane in hand, coat open, expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I came." She took in the room, its scuffed floors, mismatched chairs, a teenage girl laughing softly with a nurse over a puzzle. "This is where you spend your mornings?" Tiffany asked. "Some of them," Caleb said. She nodded slowly. "How much would it cost?" He blinked. "Cost for what?" "To make this permanent," she said. "Not bigger, just stable." Caleb hesitated. "More than a donation." "Good," she said. "I'm not offering charity." He studied her for a long moment. "Then what are you offering?" She met his gaze. "Responsibility." They stood there, the words settling between them like a contract written without paper. "I don't want my story used to inspire people to push past pain," Tiffany continued. "I want it used to teach them when to listen." Caleb nodded once. "That's harder." "I know." She reached into her bag and handed him an envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note addressed to Emma. Lucy's ear is holding up beautifully. Thank you for trusting me with her courage. Beneath it, documents, seed funding, enough to build something that wouldn't vanish when attention moved on. Caleb closed the envelope, throat tight. I can't take this. Yes, you can, Tiffany said. You already did. Every time you didn't give up on me. He shook his head. Tiffany, this isn't repayment, she said firmly. It's alignment. A beat passed. Are you okay with that? She asked quietly. Caleb met her eyes. I am. They didn't hug. They didn't touch. They stood there like two people who had crossed something together and knew better than to rush the landing. That night, alone again, Tiffany sat in her sunroom with the curtains open. She let the city look back at her, no filters, no glass between them. She placed the small hand mirror on the table. Beside it, her phone lit up with another notification, another headline. She didn't open it. Instead, she opened a new document, not a press release, a policy draft. She titled it simply, Aftercare. Her legs ached, a deep, honest ache that reminded her she had been used. She welcomed it. Tomorrow would hurt. Tomorrow would test her. But tonight, she understood something she hadn't before. Standing was not the ending. It was the responsibility that came after. The ribbon was thinner than Tiffany Ward expected. Red satin, light enough to flutter in the breeze that slipped between the buildings and into the small courtyard where people had gathered. The new sign above the entrance read simply, Hope Center. Sitzer, no last names, no titles, no donors etched into glass, just a door. Caleb stood beside her, hands clasped, shoulders squared in a way that had nothing to do with ceremony. Emma bounced on the balls of her feet. Lucy tucked firmly under one arm, the doll's repaired ear catching the morning light. You nervous? Caleb asked. Tiffany smiled. A real one, small, steady. I used to be afraid of silence, she said. Now I listen for the heartbeat. Emma looked up. The building has one? She asked, delighted. Caleb chuckled. Every place where people get better does. Inside, the space hummed softly. Fresh paint and coffee. Children's drawings taped to walls that had not yet learned to be precious. A piano rescued from a closed rec center sat near the window, its keys imperfect, waiting. Tiffany stepped forward, scissors cool in her hand. She paused. Before we open this, she said, voice clear but unadorned, I want to say something simple. The small crowd quieted. Volunteers, neighbors, a few reporters kept at a respectful distance. This was not a gala. There were no chandeliers to lean on. This center doesn't exist because I stood up on a stage, Tiffany continued. It exists because someone believed that healing isn't loud and didn't need applause to keep going. She turned to Caleb. He believed in patience, she said, in boundaries, in the truth that a body remembers what the world tries to forget. Caleb's jaw tightened, his eyes shone. And he gave that belief a place, Tiffany finished, a place where people can be seen without being performed. She nodded once. Caleb cut the ribbon. The doors opened. Children ran in first. Families followed. Laughter spilled into the courtyard, careless and alive. Somewhere inside, someone pressed a piano key. One note, then another, uncertain but brave. Tiffany stood still for a moment, letting the sound pass through her. Not because she was afraid to move, because she was choosing where to move next. Later, when the crowd thinned, Tiffany found herself on the balcony overlooking the street. The city breathed below, horns, footsteps, the endless ordinary courage of people going somewhere. Caleb joined her, handing her a cup of tea. You were honest, he said. She smirked. I winged it. They leaned on the railing, shoulders nearly touching. You know, Tiffany said, the first time I saw you, I thought you were just a janitor. Caleb raised an eyebrow. I was. No, she said, voice warm. You were a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw. Until you saw something different. He considered that. I saw a woman with a fire in her eyes who didn't know she still had matches. She laughed, unguarded, and the sound startled her with its ease. Dance with me, she said suddenly. Caleb blinked. There's no music. There's wind, she replied, and light. That's enough. They stepped into an open patch of sun. No rush, no audience, just the quiet choreography of two people finding a shared rhythm. Their shadows moved together across the concrete, imperfect, honest. I never dreamed of this, Tiffany whispered. Me neither, Caleb said, and yet. They stood like that for a while, the world unbothered by their stillness. Weeks passed, the headlines moved on. But something else moved too. At a diner across town, a waitress watched a clip of Tiffany's speech and called her mother for the first time in a year. In a hospital ward, a veteran asked to try physical therapy again, not because he promised himself victory, but because he permitted himself another attempt. At the Hope Center, the piano learned new fingerprints. Tiffany came often, sometimes with a cane, sometimes without, always without armor. She listened more than she spoke. She learned the difference between helping and hovering. One afternoon she knelt, carefully, deliberately, beside a teen girl with a neck brace, working a puzzle with patient hands. "You don't have to finish today," Tiffany said. The girl smiled. "I know." Caleb watched from the doorway, something like peace settling in his chest. That night, back at the apartment, Emma fell asleep between them, one small hand clutching Lucy, the other resting on Tiffany's sleeve. The glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling cast a soft constellation above their heads. "She's going to be all right," Caleb whispered. Tiffany smiled in the dark. "She already is." On a cool Saturday morning, Tiffany returned to the townhouse one last time, not to reclaim it, but to release it. She packed light. The mirror went into her bag. The cane stayed by the door, not as a rule, just as an option. She paused at the threshold, feet planted, breath steady. Then she stepped out. At the Hope Center later that day, she stood at the piano. The keys were warm from use. She pressed one, then another. The sound was imperfect and alive. Caleb leaned against the wall, listening. "You're playing," he said. She shrugged, smiling. "I'm remembering." Outside, children's laughter drifted through open windows. Inside, a life rearranged itself, not into something new, but into something true. Tiffany turned to Caleb, eyes clear. "I don't want to walk alone anymore," she said. He met her gaze, unflinching. "You won't." They didn't seal it with promises. They let it stand as practice. And when evening fell, the city lights flickered on like 1,000 small affirmations. The Hope Center's doors remained open, a simple fact in a complicated world. Because healing, Tiffany understood now, was not a moment. It was a policy, a practice, a place you kept open. And once the door opens, it stays open. Not so people can rush through, but so they can learn, at their own pace, how to step forward without running away.